everyone. Ben and I are back with you for this episode of Strange Encounters, talking to you about shadow people. Shadow people show up in all sorts of places with people in having strange encounters. So we thought it was a really good topic to talk about. And Ben, you're going to start off because you've actually had some experiences, haven't you?
Yeah, I've had several experiences with shadow beings or shadow people, and it really does broaden out to a whole, really wide thing as to who or what they actually are, and they link into so many different aspects. You can slot shadow people into ghosts, you can slot them into ETs, you can slot them into demonology, you can slot them into just about anything. They really do. They are probably the one paranormal thing that you can just about put them everywhere. You can even put them with Bigfoot. They're very they're across the board. And having had encounters myself, it's I'm very open-minded anyway. But having had my own experiences, it really did bring it home to me that there are other things out there. And people talk about shadow beings as being, even like something in the peripheral of your vision. Like you can walk past an open window on a hot summer's day, and it looks like someone's just walked past the window, and you stop and you go, "Oh, gee, what was that?" It looked like someone walked past the window or walked past a doorway. And I've had those sort of experiences too, but I regard them as being on the minor level of what you'd call shadow beings, and they have there's a lot of cultural connection to shadow beings as well. So we'll talk about that perhaps a little bit later.
Yeah.
But my experiences were two that were I had three primary experiences and two that were really the most defining that I had, and they were both polar opposites too. Like the first one was what I would consider to be a terrifying experience, and the second one I'd consider to be a more positive experience. So that was really strange. And the first one occurred at night at about 3 a.m., which is the classic time for any of these sort of things to occur. And the second experience occurred at about 10:30 in the morning on a Saturday on a bright sunny day. So, and that kind of really sort of, because people who say, "Nah, it was a dream. You were just, it was it was sleep paralysis or something like that. You had a bad curry." It's not those. It's not those sort of things. So I'll talk about the first experience that I had, and it was in about 2003. So it's a relatively fair while ago now, and it would have been I haven't. It would have been in spring, in late spring, because it was quite warm but not summer, and I'd gone to bed and it was a full moon. I remember it being a full moon night, and I decided that I would sleep with the curtains wide open on that night, and let the moonlight just come in through, and that was really good. And so I went to sleep, normal night, and at about 3 o'clock in the morning, I was sleeping not facing the window, so I was sleeping with my back to the window and facing that direction, and the window's over here. So I'm lying in bed, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden I wake up and I can feel the bed moving. Like there's something next to me on the bed, leaning across the bed, like leaning over the bed. And I spun onto my back and I looked up, and it was pure moonlight coming in through the window. So I had a really clear view, and standing there is this hooded shape standing right next to my bed, and it's leaning over me, and there was like this spiral psychic energy connection that was kind of like spinning between myself and it, and all I did was scream. I just screamed at the top of my lungs, and it's sort of like, and I was absolutely awake. This was not a rub the eyes and slowly waking up and dream imagery still remaining in front of my eyes. It was not like that. It was like when I felt the bed move, it was like there was someone standing, and when you can feel a presence too, like when I was alone in the room, and you can feel a presence, and it absolutely started with that feeling of a presence. There was something in that room with me, and my immediate reaction was that it was a burglar. That was my immediate reaction, that someone's in here rifling through my drawers, standing next to my bed and rifling through my drawers. And I just happened to wake up, and I had this feeling that I was going to be stabbed. Like I just had this overwhelming feeling that someone was going to knife me. So it was a very real and physical response to something that was actually there. And then the minute I actually screamed, the entity before me just sort of woofed. It just disappeared. It just went almost like just like that. It just disappeared from this solid black hooded shape standing there, and then it just went bang. And then there was nothing there. And I just leapt out of bed. All the blankets went flying. And I just ran and switched the light on. I switched the hall light on. I switched the kitchen light on. I switched every light on in the house. I checked every room. And I came back to the bedroom, and I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. And I left the light on. And I had to leave the hall light on basically for the next week.
Really, really got to you.
It really got to me. Yeah, it was just not some sort of a bad dream experience at all. There was something standing there in that room with me, as real as steel. Like that's what it was like.
Yeah, that spiral energy that you were talking about. Can you sort of go into that a little bit more?
It was like a webbing. It was like a webbing, spirally type, and it was white. I remember it being white. The light was actually a white light, but it was It was sort of thread-like. So yeah, kind of like thread-like and spiraling and spinning around. Almost another way to describe it would almost be like those old orange bags.
Oh,
Those, those red wire orange bags that they used to have. No, they probably still have them. I don't know. They probably do. They probably haven't changed in 30 years.
They're like a concertina mechanism.
Yeah, a concertina. It was kind of like, so if you had one of them and you cut it end to end and you sort of like twisted it into sort of like something like that, it was kind of like that. And in some ways you could almost sort of like call it, I'm going to use this word, but it's probably not the right word. It's like umbilical in some ways, like, I'm not saying it's some mother connection or anything like that at all, but it was going through here. So through this third eye position here, it was where it was concentrating on, and I could see it coming down and through to this part of my head here.
Right.
And all of that would have been probably like 10 seconds, like it was really a very quick, but at the same time, even though all that happened quickly, it happened slowly at the same time. So so you could say, okay, you're laying on your side, you turned over, you screamed, and you sat up. So, that could be 5 seconds.
Yes.
If you think there's someone next to you, that could be 5 seconds. But in feeling of time, it felt longer than what that would have been. Not in a slowed down kind of way, not in a like a no, not that sort of experience either, or, feeling really dopey. I didn't feel dopey or under some sort of anesthetic, or it was an immediate bang, and it was, and live and out of bed and trembling.
Pretty amazing experience.
That was an amazing experience, and that was really something that, and it scared me for a long time. Like it scared me for a very long time.
So that was
because
8 years ago.
Yeah, and I thought that like this could happen again. Like, it never, to my knowledge, it hadn't happened previously. And it was just. I was just so scared of that reoccurrence. Like, like this could happen any given night, any given time.
Yes.
Then what's going on? Like it could come back on any case. I still have that thought.
Yes.
I still go to bed with that thought that this could actually happen again at any point in time, and I have no control over it.
Yes.
Or it may have been a one-off event, but actually wasn't a one-off event. But
because you had experience. Why don't you?
Well, I had another experience. Well, I've had 3 experiences, and the second experience was in another house a couple of years later, where I did have the other main experience, and but that night I woke up in bed and I sat bolt upright and I screamed, and I went straight back down to sleep again. But I could feel a presence standing next to the bed. But that was not a moonlit night. That was as dark as a black steer's bum on a black moonless night. That was really dark, but I could feel something standing next to the bed. But I just basically woke up, screamed, and went back down again. So that was that experience. That was a really quick experience, but that didn't stay with me either. Like that experience sort of went away very quickly, and I wasn't like petrified about that. That was just something that happened one night.
So you woke up and you screamed and you went back to sleep. How many people go back to sleep after they scream?
Not many. But in this particular instance, I did. But that was not a dream either. Yeah, that experience was not a dream either. That was not a dream state experience. It was not a remembering a dream. Like it was nothing like that. It was awake up, but I went straight back down to sleep again. But that's what I remember of it.
Yeah, and when was that?
That was about 2006.
2006, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then what I would call the confirmation moment, very Whitley Strieber, I suppose, to use that word, the confirmation moment for me was probably about 6 months after that. That second, what I call minor experience, was one Saturday morning. I was in my yard, and I had a couple of those shadow experiences of beings going past doorways and windows and standing in doorways. So had a couple of those sort of experiences as well. To the point one time where I actually thought someone was outside, and I went outside and opened the door and looked and thought there was someone standing there, but of course there's nobody standing there. And so that was weird. But on this particular occasion, it was a lovely Saturday morning, and I was standing outside and had an old basketball hoop and a basketball, and thought, what the hell, I'll play some basketball. Not very good. Not exactly any great level at all. And I'm just out there and I'm just shooting hoops. And all of a sudden I felt like I was being watched, as in like a neighbor was peering over the fence. That was the impression that I had, that there's a neighbor standing there looking over the fence. And I turned around and my car was parked next to the shed, and standing next to my car was what I describe as a human shape, but it was like someone had taken a sliver of night and put it into the day. So think of the blackest and darkest night, and here is a shape that's standing next to my car, human height, standing right next to my car, and it's just standing there. And I turned around, I looked at it, and I blinked my eyes, and I did all that just to make sure I didn't have a sty or something floating around in there. And it's just standing there. And I started to walk towards it. And as I walked towards it, I could see that it actually had like golden light around it. Around the edge of it, there was this golden light that was sort of like sheening off and perhaps sparkling a little bit too. But the core of it was as black as black. And as I got closer to it, and you're probably talking a distance of about maybe 20 meters, right? Pretty close, very close. It actually moved behind the car. As I moved towards it, it moved behind the car. And then it moved, and it glided. Like it just glided. It was gliding. There was no walking or anything like that. It was like gliding. There was no wind. There was no smoke. There was nothing like that. And this thing just, as smooth as that, just glided. And it glided around in front of the shed. And then it made a right angle down behind the shed. All right. So it went across the shed door, and you can go between the fence and the shed. And it went down there. Like it actually moved like that. And I thought, I didn't quite have the courage to run where it went, but I ran down the other side of the shed where I would have intersected with it. And I ran down there. And when I got down there was nothing there. And my heart was palpitating, but in a much better way than the previous experience. I didn't have any fear at all with this experience. It was really just a curiosity.
Okay.
I felt curious about it because it was whatever it was standing there looking at what I was doing, which is absolutely nothing exciting at all. And it's watching me, and it's standing there, and I had that feeling that I'm being observed.
Yeah. So when it's you said it's watching you mean You couldn't see any eyes.
No, there's no eyes.
No, just it was there and you felt it was watching you.
I felt it was watching me. Yeah, exactly. And you couldn't turn around and make out a nose, a face, a mouth, or anything like that. It was pretty much just this, but it was very defined. The shape was very defined. It was like you'd taken a cookie cutter stamp of the night and you'd put it straight into the daylight. And it was just like, it was like a piece of night in the daytime. Bright, brilliant sunshine morning, absolutely sunshine morning. And I thought, what the hell was that? Like, you know, it was a really strange experience to have. And even to this day, I'm goggled about seeing something like that in the daylight. You can say, yeah, nighttime experiences and nighttime experiences, you know, and you know, they're much more easier to sort of dismiss in some ways, you know, so no, you were just dreaming, you know. But during the daytime, you don't have dreams, you don't sleep, you know, and I don't suffer from any sleeping abnormalities at all, you know. So there was very much a real lucid, real time experience. And we spoke last week or last time on our previous episode about what would you do.
Yeah.
Right. And I did what I said I would do, in the fact that I went to chase after it, even though I wasn't ballsy enough to go straight and follow it directly. I went the other way. And as I was approaching the edge of the shed, I thought, what am I going to encounter when I come around the corner here? You know, am I going to encounter some gateway, some Stargate, or you know, what could that actually be?
Disappear into another reality.
Well, that's the thing. Like, you know, very open to all those possibilities. But
your descriptions, particularly your first and your third one, they sort of elicit the idea that these things are sort of bleeding through from somewhere else.
Yes.
You know, that's in just the way that you're describing. The first one, it had the gold around the edge. This one was like you had a sliver of dark and you'd put it in the 10 o'clock in the morning in the daylight, you know, like it's just a sense of otherworldly, aren't they?
It is. Yeah. It's this bleeding crossover.
Yeah.
You know, and like with the UFO experience that I had, you know, not that long ago, really good. I'm not going to talk about that tonight. We'll save that for another episode. But that was very similar. Like it almost is like there's this reality just sort of is like a watercolor. Like it just sort of can bleed across into different things at different times with whatever ingredients that make that happen. We don't know, but they were my experiences of what I would call shadow people. What they are is who knows, you know. Both were black. One was wearing a hood. You couldn't describe the other one as being like that. It was just a black, really black shape. And I got quite close to it too. Like, you know, I probably got to within 3 meters of it.
Yeah, wow, that's close.
So yeah, and then it just glided off and drifted around the corner. So, and I've not had anything like it since.
The shadow beings are very often related to hooded beings.
Yes,
I find, and people who report close encounters, for example, will sometimes report seeing hooded beings, there's sometimes. Shadow people are also sometimes associated with ghost intruders as well. Like I said, in conjunction with close encounters with extraterrestrials, I should qualify that.
Yeah.
And there are different types too, like I guess you could say under the title of, under the umbrella of shadow beings, are like some of them are benign and some of them are negative. Some of them are red-eyed. And if you remember the story of Kelly Cahill and her experience, those beings that came out of the ship had glowing red eyes.
Yep.
The hooded shadows, like you talked about. There's another phenomenon called the hatman. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I haven't heard of that. No. Yeah, I've heard of like Slender Man, you know, which is the faceless creature that's tall and skinny and wears a suit.
Yeah, well, not too dissimilar, except the hatman is often reported as wearing a hat, like a fedora hat, and people don't see the feet. It just sort of comes down to the ground. They don't see the feet, and it also glides smoothly along in front of them too. So yeah, I just find it really, really interesting.
Yeah, the other point I would like to bring up too is about dimensionality of what I experienced too. Like, I didn't feel in either occasion that it was like me, that you could reach around an arm, that you could, like grab a physical round head. Neither of those experiences had that feel. Even the hooded creature didn't seem to me like it was a three-dimensional creature. You couldn't say there was three-dimensionality to it.
Did you notice anything about your body response, like the hairs standing up, like there was some sort of electricity?
Oh yeah, I was
because that's just fear.
Well, fight or flight response, and mine is usually flight. 9 times most of the time,
Yeah.
but I try to, but as I say, like for paranormal stuff, I would try to resist that, and I'm proud to say that I did. But yes, like definitely a heightened, like, pulse goes up, heart rate goes up. I think you become very, very, very focused in your attention. Like, it's almost like everything else sort of disappears while this is going on, particularly the first experience, not so much the second experience being in daylight, but the first experience was that feeling of, I was in this sort of, the whole thing, and almost, I had this idea too, it was almost like a screen in some ways. Like a screen, not ice cream, a screen.
Yeah.
Like it could have been like a screen, like you could have, like it might have even been like that thin, like it was, as I said, they talk about this dimensionality to it. Like it wasn't, the bed was moving. So there was something against the bed. So that's what woke me up, was something against the bed. And that's what made me immediately think it was a burglar rather than anything else. So there was something that it's either like bumped the bed or tapped me on the shoulder or done something, or I've woken up, because people talk about, like, you've woken up and you've disturbed it, and then you see it for a few seconds, and then it disappears. Like Peter Curie's experience was like that, So you can say, well, maybe you woke up early from whatever was going on. Maybe in that first experience you could say that, but the second one, no, this thing was just there watching me, and then it turned around, it saw me, and then it did take evasive action to disappear, but not it didn't dart off either, It moved at walking pace. Like, you can't say that when it glided off, like it didn't do that. It just glided off at a strolling walking pace, which made me almost think it was an Aboriginal spirit.
Yeah, that's another possibility too.
That was another thought that I had, is was that Aboriginal spirit? I've never had that experience before, and I've walked in many, 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 many bushland areas around here, and this is a huge Aboriginal area too, with great Aboriginal history around here, but no, I've never had that experience before.
Well, I've always been interested in the work of Rosemary Ellen Guiley. She passed away a couple of years ago, but she'd written a lot of it. She was a great paranormal researcher and written over 30 odd books. But I really got interested in her work about the jinn. The jinn were the beings from the Islamic culture that they're beings that basically they supposedly wanted dominion over the planet.
Yes.
So there were people were having experiences with hostile factions of the jinn, but some of them could be benevolent too. But they would observe people. And
they could shape shift.
Yep.
Into all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the genie, the classic genie, that's where the word comes from.
That's right. So they could be hostile, but they could be benevolent. And they would sometimes attack or suffocate or choke people or try to. And people would sometimes report that they'd have a feeling of their soul being removed, which again reminds me of the Kelly Cahill case. For anyone who doesn't know, Kelly had a close encounter back in the 90s. And there was this where she was driving along the road down in Victoria in Men's State, and where she and her husband saw this large craft off to the side of the road. And long story short, these beings came out from underneath and approached them, and they were silhouetted black with big, dark, glowing red eyes. more to the story, but that's basically some of it. So, and she talked about feeling that they have no soul, or they have no souls. And I've heard other people saying that they've had a feeling that there's attempts for their soul to be removed when they've had these interactions with these beings.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I can't say that I had that experience when I had this sort of connection to it, but that's not to say that may or may not have been happening.
Yeah.
Overall, I would rate that as a negative experience. You know, I rated that experience as a negative experience. You know, the fact that you're startled awake is probably 90% of that.
Yeah.
So you're left with 10% wondering with that emotional response to that type of experience.
Yeah.
But my overriding feeling was that was negative. The feeling was fear, and then there was this great fear of it coming back again the next night, the night after, or who knows when it was going to turn up again. So yeah, really interesting stuff.
Well, you know, you mentioned it was blacker than night. You described it some other way, but basically people tend to describe the hatman blacker than night, with red glowing eyes, humanoid in shape, and it can move through solid objects as well as touch solid objects, and often would manifest in situations of intense negativity, and particularly around where there's family dysfunction, a bit like
poltergeisty sort of.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So were you under any stress around those times in your life when you were having those experiences?
Yeah, I think I did have stress in my life at the first experience, but not so much in the second or the third experience. That was a period of stability, but the first one occurred in a period of perhaps instability. So I don't know, like maybe your emotional beacon, let's call it that, maybe that attracts these things as well. Maybe depending what you're radiating, you know, you get what you put out, I suppose, in some ways. Maybe that's part of this experience. Like, you know, that's, you know, if you're emotionally in turmoil at a particular point in time, then maybe that might attract certain entities.
Well, I find that people who are under prolonged duress, they seem to not awaken, but open a doorway to the paranormal. And there have been a lot of people who've written about trauma and the paranormal, the connections between the two, when people have had traumatic experiences, and after that, then these other strange things start to happen. Like people who have near-death experiences, people who have report close encounters, we know those types of reports are intertwined with many other paranormal type of experiences.
Yeah. Around that time, I also did a Reiki course from memory.
Okay.
And I had a third eye awakening at that course. So yeah, so that was, so that, whether that opened the gates of hell, I don't know, but
well, maybe something else slipped through at the time we shouldn't have.
Maybe something else came through. You got to call the roach man, you know. So yeah, that's another possibility. But that's you know, these events happen. You know, they're just my simple personal experiences that I've had, and people out there watching this Zoomcast will go, yes, I had something similar. I had something completely unsimilar to that, but I know what you're talking about in terms of your responses to it. And you know, you could have seen Hatman, Slender Man, anything under the sun. But these things just don't happen out of nowhere. It's not imagination. It's not sleep related disorders, or, you know, maybe life chaos can contribute to it, or any sort of events in someone's life, maybe, you know, grief or something might trigger these sort of experiences as well. So
do you wonder why you though?
Yeah, well, I've always been into UFOs, that's well known, and you know, and at that time that was prior to what I would call my breakout UFO time, which occurred about 2010. So these experiences happened years before I had that the desire to go out and become a UFO investigator and get involved in the paranormal on a semi-professional level, I suppose. So it occurred, before that time, but I'd seen UFOs previously. I had some ghost experiences previous to that as a child. Had some ghost experiences. So I was not a stranger to the paranormal. It didn't hit me as a complete sort of like, oh my God, my worldview's been turned upside down. I can't believe in Jesus anymore, or any of those sorts of experiences. So that was all those sorts of. So yeah, it came before I was what I'd consider myself to be a full-on paranormal interested person. But yeah, why me?
Well, you wouldn't be alone, because these things have happened throughout history.
Yeah.
And actually, there's I'm just going back to the hooded beings now, because they are closely associated with shadow beings, whatever. There was, I'm just trying to think, there's beings known as the genie cuculati that came from over near under the Roman area, a long time ago, under the Roman Empire, and they were known. And there's actually statues that have been that people have found that exist, where they're showing these hooded beings. So this is not new. This is not, this is something that has been happening to humanity for a very long time.
And cross-culturally too.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got the story of like the banshee, when people die, I think it is.
Yes, the Irish.
That's right.
Folklore.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think who else there is, but yeah, there's a lot of, and actually even some, strangely enough, I have had reports from people who've had close encounters, and they've also seen hooded beings during their encounters. It's very strange, because some of them have reported being taken on a spaceship and interacted with beings who were aliens, and in some cases were wearing hoods and cloaks. It's very strange. I don't know why.
It is strange. The other odd experience I've had, and I've even had it recently, is a vibration. And you think you've got your phone in your pocket, and you think your phone's vibrated. Oh, because you feel this vibration, and you go, oh, must be the phone. Oh, I'm not carrying my phone. And I've had that happen quite a few times. It happens now. And it's really weird. It's a very weird experience. A minor thing, a really minor thing, but it's like that same as a phone would go, and it's like I'm feeling it around my hip area, in around there. Is something is vibrating. It's really strange.
So by bringing that up, are you suggesting that strange encounters, like people who have strange encounters, have a wide variety of strange encounters?
I think you can. You can have one encounter. You could have 100 encounters. You could have 1,000 encounters. They could all be different encounters. Like, or people are known by the one encounter that they had, So anything's possible. Anything is possible under the sun.
Yeah. Have you got any thoughts on, like you just briefly touched on before, about them bleeding through from other realms? What about from other times, or I don't know exactly, other maybe from the zone that we call dark matter?
Well, this is a good point. Yes, because dark. I'm not an expert on dark matter by any stretch of the imagination, but my understanding is that it's kind of like it's out there. It binds the universe together in this kind of Star Warsian kind of a way, if you wanted to think about that. And that's a possibility too. I mean that we've got that this stuff can bleed in from somewhere somehow. it comes in and it goes out. It can just be floating around, and it can appear at any place at any time. It really could be. And you talk about the beings, like I don't have the feeling that it's from a particular era or anything like that. Like I don't think I'm dealing with 19th century entities, and the house that I was living in at the time when I had the second encounter, that was a 1955 house, just an old crappy fibro house. Had a lot of rentals. It had been a rental for like 40 years, so it was. I'd actually purchased it, but that house probably had a lot of psychic energy about it. And particularly when I first moved into it, there was some sort of disturbance in there. I'm getting ghostly now, I think, but desperately trying not to. But I feel like I'm getting down ghostly roads. That buildings definitely can have some sort of an imprint or impression on them.
So could these shadow beings be some sort of manifestation from collective energy of some sort? Could that?
I do. I think that's quite possible. That if you've got some crappy share house that's been lived in for a long time with people with negative energy, that there could be this cloud of energy that can gain some sort of foothold or power in that location. And that's not about like a murder or something like that, or someone being killed in a place. I don't think it needs to be as dramatic as that, although that obviously can occur as well. I think that, the old man lived there for 40 years and he died in the house, and they see him in the hallway every now and then. That's like heart attachment to a place. I think it is possible for places to garner an energy. I think that's really, really true.
And some of it manifests into this reality but we see it still as dark. Is that sort of like a cultural thing, or actually it's not really, is it? Because other people have seen it through the centuries.
That's right. It's sort of probably transcends culture. In that regard, people have had these encounters for a very long time. And the thing is, like, there's similarities, but there's also a whole vast range of differences out there too. People might say, "Yeah, I saw a shadow being Ben," but it was nothing like your experience. But you'd still have to shake hands and agree that yours was a shadow experience as well. It's the lack of knowledge that is the whole problem here. We have an emotional response to something that we know nothing about, and we are given no education on this in any way, shape, or form, in terms of, like, we're not told that this is going to happen to us in our lives. We're not taught about it in any capacity, other than through self-discovery. And you're kind of left on your own, So, and then you try to find support networks and things like that for different encounters, which I'd never really bothered to do for my experiences, because I didn't feel that I needed that personally. And it wasn't an ongoing thing that I experienced on a regular basis where you go, man, I got to get rid of these ghosts. It wasn't that sort of an experience. There were 2 or 3 distinct things that I had occur in my life, like my previous ghost encounters. They scared you. You marveled at them at the time, and then you sort of puzzle about them occasionally, and you move on like any other encounter.
Yeah, I guess so.
You have no encounter too. What was that thing?
Or what was that happened in my life?
Yeah, exactly. At least a Bigfoot is something clumping through the bush, I suppose. But we spoke about that last time. But the shadow being itself is a sinister word. Like it has so many negative connotations to a shadow being. We don't describe them as rainbow beings, or we're describing it as a shadow being as dark as my t-shirt. That's sort of how we describe it, which sort of really brings about that you're being observed or watched or preyed upon.
Or it's something that's negative, because we even have it in our ordinary talk about our own personal shadows, don't we? So, which is the dark side of us, the part of us it can be negative and that we don't like to show in public, and it has that connotation to it.
It does. It absolutely does. Yeah, there's good, bad, and everything in between in every person in all sorts of different ways. And this, and even your physical shadow, like, as a kid, I can remember marveling over my physical shadow that seemed to follow me everywhere I went. And you've seen those cartoons where the shadows do their own thing and stuff, and in various Disney cartoons and things. And it's just, you just go, yeah, the shadow itself is the dark reflection of me, but it's your constant friend too, because it's always with you.
Well, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You're always together, except at night. But maybe you are together at night as well.
Oh, well, I haven't had a shadow being, well, that's not, well, yeah, I'd say I haven't had a shadow being experience where it's just I've seen, I've seen things that are silhouetted, but I wouldn't say it's actually shadow. I'd say that's more extraterrestrial. But
Yeah.
yeah, so, but we'll talk about that some other time. But yeah, very interesting subject. Where do they come from? What are they doing here? What are they watching? And how long have they been here? And and when are they going away?
Yeah. Are they going away?
Yeah,
You
maybe they're
know,
always here. Maybe they're always here, and there are certain circumstances that we actually, where we can actually see them momentarily.
yes. Yeah, I'm happy with that, because that's my experience.
Mm.
I've seen them momentarily, like for you know a few minutes, or 30 seconds or something like that. It's never, you're not sitting around seeing them for extended periods of time. It's only short periods of time, and then those constant, like flitting past doorways and things like that occur as well. And you brush them off a lot of the time. You just go, oh, that was nothing. It's just my imagination. And I
Mm.
did do a lot of that, and then I went to this point. No, it's not my imagination. There is something at that particular house. There's something that is walking around or inside this house in some capacity.
Mm.
Um, you'd see a shape in a doorway, that sort of thing, but not long enough to sort of fix up on it and go, that was a 55-year-old dude, like you didn't wearing a jeans and a red checkered shirt, like nothing like that at all.
Yeah, so there might be, I mean, we might wonder where they come from and what they're doing here, but actually the triggers for that, for them actually being able to say they come from another realm, for them to be able to enter this realm or out this reality, the triggers could actually come from where they're from.
Mm.
Because we have, and we will talk about this in a future episode, we have people who report time slips, don't we? So
Yeah.
where people and scenarios or scenes, I should say, appear from other times, but in this reality. So there's some very strange things that go on in our universe.
There is, and I think you can look to the ancient cultures for a lot of these answers too. Like, I think people that lived 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago were much more connected to the universe than people are today. Like, they lived in a time without electricity to start with. They gazed at the sky every night, whether you're a Roman living in Rome or, a little Indian in the Amazon jungle. No one had electricity. They were all out there under the sky every night, and they had a much deeper connection to whereas we're all isolated from it now. Like we all live in these artificial environments of air conditioning and fluoro lighting, and all these things are artificial. And I think they eat away at who we are, and they diminish our perceptibilities in so many ways. That's why I think animals have a greater perception as well, because they're so much more grounded and connected to let's say Earth, than humans are. We're so separate now. And in society too, there's a lot more separation, whereas in ancient cultures there was more togetherness. And I don't mean that necessarily in a sort of I don't know, like a Brady Bunch kind of way. I think I mean that people back in olden times, the cultures were glued together tighter, and not as spread apart as we are now. But in ancient times, they might have had a greater handle on what these things were, or certainly they were able to create backstories to it that made sense to them.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
They made those backstories.
You're talking about the Western world when you say disconnected, because
that's what I'm talking about. The Western world, is disconnected. I'm not saying that African cultures are disconnected. Anyone who lives still in that type of with connection would still potentially have that. And I've heard of some amazing, witch doctor stories from out of Africa and things like that, and people being raised from the dead. Like, those, they're real stories from Africa, So, you go, wow, what's happening there? What do they have that we don't have, And, it just doesn't ever seem to come out into our world at all. These stories are always underneath, and we're just not plugged in the way that we perhaps were in the past. And if you cut through, cultural, things that are particular to that culture and look into things, maybe, I'm not saying that any of us can do this necessarily, but if we could, then maybe the answers might be there. Or typically, missing texts and all that sort of stuff, there's the text on shadow beings. That one got destroyed in the Great Fire of Alexandria in Egypt. Just poof, up it's gone, So you'll not know what it is.
We certainly lost a lot of knowledge, that's for sure, and understanding about the greater reality as well. So, but there's this we can learn, and I think a lot of people, not a lot of people, but people in this community who will be watching this episode would be. Who were watching Strange Encounters would probably be saying similar sort of things. So
it's things like COVID-19, like, are these things designed to bring us back down to some type of reality in some ways? Like it's I ask myself that question too. Like, this is something that's pushing our world in a way it hasn't been pushed in anyone's lifetime who's alive now. No one who's really alive now who was around when the Spanish flu was here. They're all dead, and we're seeing these things arising. Maybe that can be some part of some type of resetting of us in some way too. I don't know. It's just a thought.
And I think that we're creating our own backstory to that as well, aren't we?
We are 100%. It's the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, but we'll stay on task because there would be another 90 minutes of discussion.
More,
on that type of thing. So, and I'd encourage anyone who's listening or watching our Zoomcast to put a comment down. Comment on my experiences, on your experiences, and anything else at all, because these Zoom discussions are just designed to get everybody thinking.
And it's cool for you to share your experiences too.
I don't mind sharing it. Like, it's I think it's something that I encourage people to do. Here's the sharing stick. It's your turn to share now. Like, have you had an experience, and let's talk about it. Let's bring these things out. Like, even with the UFO debate and the disclosure and the Nimitz encounter and everything going on there too. It's like, we're slowly getting some barriers. The permafrost is cracking in some ways.
I'm sure we'll get onto those in future episodes.
Yeah, I was listening to a 1970s, I think it was about 1970s thing on Australian UFOs today, and it was just the Blue Book line, like from straight up and straight down from that. It's 97% of cases are explainable or not enough information. That shutdown mentality that they had back then in officialdom. And I think this paranormal world is really pushing against the people sitting on top of it. Like, it really is.
I think people's personal experiences always do that, because they're living with the reality of their experience, at least in their own thinking. And there's like you say, an official, the status quo about what is in the world and what's real and what's not, etc. Yeah. So.
And the other funny thing too is, like, I've got another side project going, looking at all old UFO newspaper articles from right across Australia and Victoria primarily. But as much as the media has lampooned and made fun of all the paranormal over the years, they have also steadily reported it in the same way. And in fact, it's our only lasting record out there is media reports. Like they are out there for everything, and particularly UFOs. Like there's a myriad of UFO reports that have been put in there. You don't see a lot of shadow people reports, or find a lot of ghost stories in regular news, but UFOs make it into. I'm not turning this into a UFO discussion. They make it into the media on a very constant level, and as much as they lampoon all these things, they do look into it.
Actually, I think that there are, people go to Trove, the government website where they're National Archives, where they're storing as many as they can of past newspaper clippings. I've found a lot of paranormal experiences in there, not UFOs, but other types of strange experiences that couldn't be explained. So it's well worth digging through there and putting in all your different keywords for searching to see what you come up with.
Yeah, I encourage everyone to question, to ask, to try and find out what you can. And I always encourage people to not just be focused on American stuff all the time. Australia has some incredible experiences of its own. There's great Australian ghost stories, great Australian shadow beings and UFOs and all and yowies and stuff. So there's so much going on in Australia. Look local. You don't need to look globally. You can look locally and find a whole raft of fascinating things.
And if anyone watching this wants to see some of those interesting reports and news articles and all sorts of things, I've put them, go to our Strange Encounters Facebook page, Strange Encounters Downunder Facebook page, and you'll see a lot of articles that I put on there out of old magazines and newspapers and various books that you can't get your hands on now, etc. There's some really good stories there. It's a great resource for finding those. So, and I'm about to put one on that Ben has given me just recently too, as he's going through his newspaper articles. So anyway, and if you're interested in yowies, we did our last episode on yowie. So go back and have a look at that. And if you enjoyed this and you'd like to hear more, then subscribe to the channel here and remember to tap that bell and get all notifications. So I guess we'll be back in another fortnight, Ben, and we talk about the next topic.
Absolutely, that's it, and that's to be determined at this point in time. So stay tuned, interested viewers. That be sure we'll have something else to get you thinking.
Yes, but for sure it will be strange.
Okay. Guaranteed.
Okay, see you next time, folks.
Bye.
Bye.